Welcome into Studio A. Basketball season keeps rolling on. We talked about the men last week. Now we have the women's side of things this week. Maria Trivelpiece alongside Kyle Youmans. Kyle, so much happened within the women's game. Somebody picked up their first loss. We're going to preview it. We'll talk a little bit about it in just a moment. But overall thoughts so far on this week of women's basketball?
Ooh, and that's the thing. It's the last 2 weeks of women's basketball since we've really talked about it a lot. We could talk about the men's again as well. We could talk about the women's side of things as well, but both of them are very, very active at the top of the standings, and we're starting to see some upsets. We mentioned that the last time around. Who's going to emerge out of the back half of this American Conference schedule? Because you know teams are going to find their rhythm. Yep. You've got the teams on the right side like Memphis and East Carolina and Tulsa that were expected to be higher along the way. Guess what? They're starting to win some games. They're starting to peek their head up a little bit. But then you've got the juggernauts, as I like to call them, at the top of the standings like UTSA, South Florida, North Texas, and Tulane that are kind of cannibalizing each other up there at the top of the standings.
I like that verb. That's a good one. Freaks me out a little bit, but yeah.
Maybe a little bit, but that's part of it. It's a dog-eat-dog world inside the American when you got a conference this deep across the board. So excited to talk about it. And I want to shout out the Tulane Green Wave and what they've been doing as well down there in New Orleans. No one expected Tulane to be where they are, first-year head coach, and here they are right there knocking on the door. If they get a couple of wins over the next few weeks against these top teams in the conference and the teams that they're chasing, who's to say Tulane's not a team that's clamoring for that regular season title?
And here's the thing. They beat North Texas. You know what I mean? So talking about those teams at the top, they already showed that they can beat them. One team, though, climbing their way back up into the top of the standings is South Florida. They lost 2 games. We were unsure what's going to happen. The preseason favorite, they're falling. No. Oh, my goodness. They're like, hold on. Stop panicking. We're still very good. We beat Duke already this season. So we're like, all right, we're back on the Bulls train here, and they're looking very good. They handed UTSA their first loss of the season. Nobody's been able to beat UTSA. One thing to note in that game is that Jordan Jenkins didn't play, and I think that's a factor. But South Florida has looked really good. They're looking like that preseason favorite that they were tabbed as.
I want to give the credit where credit is due because, like you said, we'll talk about Jordan Jenkins missing and what that meant for UTSA a little bit later in the show. But you win that game if you're South Florida because you're South Florida, because you are as talented as you are across the board. Jenkins or no Jenkins, you saw South Florida get back to what they do best. Give a lot of credit to Jose Fernandez. He's been around this game plenty of times. He's been to NCAA tournaments. He's been to the big dance. He's won conference championships in the past. And he said, you know what? Yes, we lost to North Texas. Yes, we lost to UAB. But don't forget, we won 6 straight going into that, and we're certainly in the at-large bid conversation prior to a couple of those losses. This is just a return to the normal down in Tampa. This is a return to normal for the Bulls, playing that inside-out brand of basketball, taking care of the basketball, which was a big bugaboo against the Blazers in the Mean Green. And I loved what they've been able to do from some of the players later on in the bench, deeper into the bench, and maybe even not the high-end players like a Sammy Puisis, who's up there hitting a ton of shots and put up a ton of points. They've done that, and they utilize their star players, but I give credit to players like Laura Putu, who came into the season maybe not as the highest rated player on the roster, but she's been doing double digits in most of the major categories throughout this win streak and has taken a huge step in the right direction in her scoring that just adds another element to this roster.
And I think Carla Brito's another one where she's just been incredibly consistent. I think that when you look at some of the big names, you'll see Sammy Puisis have a big game, and you'll see even Romy Levy, who's been kind of up and down all year. You'll see her when she has a big game. You're like, okay, that makes sense. But Carla Brito's just there every single game. She's making shots, she's rebounding, she's taking care of the basketball as well. So she's kind of playing that role that the Bulls need as well. So she's kind of helping out with some of those bigger scores, and I think that's something that's really helped as well. And I think they're just, like you said, sharing the basketball. And I think finally the South Florida team, that sounds bad, not finally, they lost 2 games and we're like panicking.
Sure.
Them getting back on track a little bit, I think, is because they're playing that brand of basketball that's worked so well for them the entire time Jose Fernandez has been there.
We talked about this a little bit off air about the international flair that South Florida is able to recruit to. People want to go play for Jose Fernandez. People want to go play in Tampa, Florida, in the beautiful Youmans Center. All of it is a draw. But when you get there, it's about what you do. And what they've been doing from an international standpoint is they pass the ball. They have ball movement. The ball has life. I mean, if you and I are passing things back and forth on this show, it's going to be more fun to watch and more effective than if it was just me talking and rambling for 30 minutes and then you talking and rambling for 30 minutes. You got to be able to share the rock and share the love, and they've done that. That's one reason why Putu has had the season that she's had. She's not your traditional post. She can facilitate. She can handle the rock. She can do a little of those things along the way. You mentioned Brito. There are times where she has to take over as a scorer. There are times where she has to create balance, as you see here from top to bottom, and that's exactly what they've done well, and that's good coaching across the board. Knowing the players that you've recruited, knowing their strengths and what they were taught from a young age forward overseas or wherever you end up drafting or recruiting them from, you get those things to your program and then you mold them in the best way possible, and that's what makes a good coaching staff, and you're starting to see that midway through conference play.
And I think you see them all buying into their roles as well, right? They all know what their job is on this team. They know the system that Jose runs. He recruits to that. So it's all of this just meshing together. And I'll ask you, how do they continue just to be successful, especially with these last couple big wins against top conference opponents?
Well, a lot of the teams at the top of this conference are known for good defense, right? They take the basketball away. UTSA, North Texas, UAB even, that's up there. Tulane. Tulane's a great team in terms of forcing turnovers. When you take care of the basketball, it allows for those weapons to maneuver. It allows for them to do exactly what you just said. Stay in their role, stay in their lane. They beat North Texas because they stayed to their game plan all the way into the fourth quarter. North Texas got in maybe a little bit of foul trouble. They got out of their game plan a little bit, and they were outscored 21-9 in the third quarter of that game, and that allowed for South Florida to continue pushing forward with a big win over North Texas. So, yeah, I think all of those things that we just mentioned play a factor, but it's just plain and simple. Keep it to the game plan. Do what you were taught to do from a foundational standpoint, a fundamental standpoint, and continue forward, because there's a lot of good things that the South Florida team does, and they're going to continue to do that along the way. One team that I already gave a shout out to, the Tulane Green Wave, has been on another level, Maria, and you got a chance to catch up with one that covers this Tulane team.
The Green Wave are rolling, especially in conference play, so who better to talk about them than former Tulane standout and current color analyst Tiffany Aidoo. Tiffany, thank you so much for joining All-American today.
Thank you for having me. Really excited to talk shop.
We are very excited as well because you are an expert on all things Green Wave. So I want to start with 7-3 in conference play for the Green Wave. What do you think's contributed to that?
I think they have such an incredible team chemistry. And as we know, with college basketball, it takes time to grow, adapt, and find your chemistry. And kudos to Ashley Langford, who's really instilled some incredible values with this team. They are turning defense into offense. And I think that's been a tremendous factor in the ways that they're able to pull out dubs in some of these close wins, because the American Conference is a tough conference to play in, and on any given day, any team can win.
Now, you mentioned the way that this team has been gelling, and very quickly as well. This is Ashley Langford's first year. What do you think it is about the way that she coaches and the players that she's brought in from different spots that has helped them gel so well and been so good?
I think she has really high expectations. I think it makes a big difference to have two of your really standout players, V. Keenan and Sharice Pittman, come from Stony Brook with you and bring that experience, and not only playing as veterans, but also playing for Coach Ashley Langford. And then Tulane has returning players and newcomers who have also adapted very well in this system. So this team has adapted and they've been able to find their stride. And I'm so impressed with the tenacity that they bring defensively. Holding teams to 64 points is not an easy feat. They just played an outstanding matchup against UAB, who is the top scoring team in the conference as well. They shoot tons of threes, can make tons of threes, and they held them to about 50-something points. So that says a lot about the way that this team has grown, adjusted, and been able to play transition their defense to offense. And talking about their offense, they got multiple players scoring, and we can get into that too.
We are definitely going to get into the offense. I want to go back to that defense for just 1 second. I know that at the beginning of the year, it wasn't as tough, as tenacious as it is right now. It was still good, but not where it is in the moment. Where do you think that turning point was where the Green Wave just started to play this kind of defense?
You learn strengths about players. You know where people will step up. You begin to trust your teammates on the help side of the defense. You begin to communicate better. And then you just know your offensive or your defensive set. Similar to the offensive position on the floor. You see Mabry there getting so excited in that possession, which I also think brings a lot of energy to the games they play. But when you can know how you play defensive or offensively, you can, I'm losing my words, but defensively, you can also perform so well. It's not any different from the offensive end. And one of the things Ashley Langford stated in a conversation we had before one of the games was when you can roll through and understand mechanically what you're doing, you can then just play the game of basketball. You can build on that IQ. You can then read plays. And I think that they're doing that defensively. They're able to get steals. They're able to, assess their teammates and all of those things. I'm just really proud to watch this team grow and develop over the course of this season.
Yeah, I think that building aspect that you mentioned has been so key. Let's talk a little bit about the offense now. You mentioned some of those contributors. Sharice Pittman looks so good. Who would you say, though, is the most surprising contributor that maybe we didn't think would be helping so much in this Green Wave offense?
I don't think I had any specific player that I knew would step up. But it's really impressive to see any incoming freshman who has to adapt to collegiate athletics step up the way that they have. So I'm going to give a lot of credit to Kendall Sneed, who has been four-time freshman of the week in the American Conference. And she has been playing tremendous basketball and is playing with so much confidence. But I want to give credit to the entire offensive or the entire team in terms of their offense performance. I'm looking at the stats from last game, and 3 players combined scored 54 of the 72 points against UAB. And V. Keenan, we know, is the top shooter, one of the top shooters, 3-point shooters in the country. She didn't score, and it still made a difference to see any player on any given day can step up and score the basketball. And I think that's just trust that the players being able to make reads and know who's hot on game days. And Whittington had 28 points, and that was her highest game scoring game in her career. And that was impressive.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point of just so many different people contributing to the scoring for Tulane. And where do you think that comes from? Is that something that Ashley Langford preaches, just sharing the basketball and making sure everybody's getting their touches? Or is it something that these young women are developing themselves?
I think it's both and, right? You have to play your part to be able to make a team. And I think each one of these players takes seriously what their position is to win games. And so no one player is looking out there, looking to score or have the highest scoring game. I think each player is looking to win. And one of the things that Ashley Langford talks about a lot with this Tulane team is we have to be able to share the basketball on the floor. We've got to move the basketball. When they're playing their best basketball, they're getting a lot of touches. They're running in transitions. They're scoring at all 3 levels. And I think that's fun basketball to watch, coach, and play.
You mentioned they beat UAB recently. They've also beaten North Texas. They've beaten those top teams in the American. Now, they haven't played South Florida yet. So when you look ahead to that matchup, I know there's a couple of games still circled on the calendar for Tulane, but when you look ahead to that matchup, what would it take for Tulane to beat one of those other top teams in the American?
I'm going to take the words from Ashley Langford's mouth and what she would say. Just play the same game that you've been playing. There's nothing that you need to change. One of the things that happens off the floor that you can control is scout. You spend a lot of time watching film. You spend a lot of time knowing player tendencies. And I think South Florida is a team that has such incredible players. And this is a team that they were looking forward to playing. And then unfortunately, New Orleans had a snowstorm, but just thinking about what they've done well, I don't think they need to change the way that they're playing. They're playing so well.
Yeah. I agree with you. It's kind of just looking at one thing at a time. I feel like when you ask coaches that question, they're like, oh, one day at a time, one game at a time. But it is so true. And speaking of coaches, Ashley Langford, in her first year at the helm of the Green Wave, she played at Tulane. You played at Tulane. What do you think it is about going back to your alma mater that makes it just a little bit more special?
There's something so special. I can speak from my experience as an analyst to be able to come back to the institution and fall in love with it in a very different way, being able to show up and win and represent your alma mater in a different way. I think is a lot of responsibility, but it's also an exciting one. And so I think Ashley Langford certainly is really excited to step into this role and play, or not play, but be able to coach this team and deliver with wins. And she has a winning mentality. I played with her, very competitive spirit. And I see that on the sidelines. I see that in the energy that her players, her coaches are bringing to each and every matchup, each and every practice. And so you hold a lot of responsibility, but it's an exciting one.
It's certainly exciting to watch from afar. That competitive spirit within her and her players is really showing through. You've seen the improvements that they've made, and I think it is so exciting to see what's going to happen in the future. Tiffany, thank you so much for joining All-American and just breaking down this Tulane team. I can't wait to watch them more the rest of the season.
Excited as well. Thank you for having me.
I'm certainly excited to continue watching Tulane and what they bring to the table as well. They've done a great job this season, just as Tiffany does, continuing to cover the team and travel with the team as well across the board. Maria, we've got to talk about UTSA, though. Oof. We mentioned in the opening of this show, South Florida hands them their first loss. I know Jordan Jenkins was out, but is it bad that I was actually just as impressed with how UTSA played in that game against South Florida without Jordan Jenkins as some of their wins that they've had this year?
No, I don't think it's...
Is that a problem for me?
No, I don't think... I mean, you have a lot of problems, but we don't have enough time to get into that on All-American. But I will. This is not one of your problems.
This looks like a therapy session. I mean, we've got the nice chairs.
I double majored in psychology. Did you know that?
I did not.
No. So if you went on after we could record it. Actually, I think that might be really very entertaining. Anyway, I digress, as we always do here on All-American. But no, it's not surprising to me. It's not a problem because I agree. I think even without Jordan Jenkins, this UTSA team looked really good.
Yep.
I think it says a lot about Karen Aston and the way that she coaches. I think it also says a lot about the way that the Roadrunners play. So I just think that overall this team is very good. Yeah. It helps when you have somebody who's averaging close to 20 a game, or I don't even know what she's at this point, but a lot of points for you to still be competitive against the preseason favorite says a lot about this team.
And maybe current favorite, the way that they've been playing as of late. 75-63 was the final score in this game. But when you look a little bit closer, it was 41-40 with less than 3 minutes to play in the third quarter. UTSA shot the ball pretty well, 42% from the field. They were 50% from three-point land. But you couldn't stop the Bulls in the paint. They outscored and doubled up UTSA in the paint, 40-20, allowed a 58% field goal percentage allowed against. I mean, all of that kind of adds together to you missed somebody on the inside. You missed Jordan Jenkins defensively. You missed the 20 points per game that she scores on offense. You lost by 12 points in the end, and that ultimately ended up. But if Jenkins is available, I think they probably win that game the way that they played across the board. I thought Cheyenne Rowe had a nice game, 15 points along the way. Sydney Love had 14 points in the game as well. UTSA did what they needed to do. Then they get back home, and they were able to have some success along the way. After that, you have the Jenkins back in the fold against Temple. They outscored the Owls 28-10 as a team in the fourth quarter, able to open things up and win that game against the Owls. But then you look at how they've played throughout the season. I'm not worried about what UTSA brings because, like you said, and we've been very complimentary of Karen Aston on this show. For good reason. She's a good coach. She does things the right way. She builds the right way. And we talked about that matchup with North Texas that's looming, and actually by the time this airs, it's already going to be in the books. But I think that's the game of the year in the conference right now. That's the game of the year whenever it all settles down to it. And whoever ends up winning that game might have a fast track to take on South Florida and really clamor for that conference title, right?
Well, because I think both of those teams have been the most consistent at this point in the season. I think as we just hit on South Florida a little bit ago, they're back in that consistent realm. I think conference-wise, though, the teams that we've been talking about the most on this show have been UTSA and North Texas. And also what those two coaching staffs have done to build those programs up. Obviously, Jose Fernandez has been building that up for a long
25 years.
Yeah, worth. A little bit. He's kind of successful down there in the Bay.
For a minute.
Yeah, a little bit. So I think that, as you said, this will have already been played by the time this airs. But I think those two teams are so exciting to watch, and I think the buzz and like the new excitement of these teams being good and at the top of the American is going to make it that much better. I also think their styles of play and the toughness and tenacity that you see from both of these teams is something that I'm really excited about because I think it just makes for better basketball.
Yeah, don't be worried about UTSA. I know they may have been a surprise with the way that they started and the hot streak that they were on, and it took them all the way until, the 10th game, 9th game of conference slate to end up in a loss, and they lost to the preseason favorites and maybe one of the hottest teams in the conference right now. Don't be upset if you're a Roadrunners fan. You got plenty of ways to go. Karen Aston's going to get that thing right, and it's probably going to start maybe yesterday against North Texas. We'll see how that ends up happening. Speaking of North Texas, of course, not their best week overall, but they did have a 19-point comeback as Jason Burton and company celebrate Scrappy as well with the Mean Green Maniacs at the Super Pit. He was pumped about it. They got it done, but it wasn't necessarily pretty against the Temple Owls on a Wednesday evening at the Super Pit.
It was not pretty. I was watching that whole game, and I kind of tuned out for a little bit because I was like, I think Temple has this in the bag. And then I
up by 19 points, right?
Yeah. And I was sitting there. I think I was typing notes for something or other, watching it. I'm like, wait,
here they come.
What's happening? What's happening? Like a couple big buckets, and I'm just like, this is a game. And so I think it says a lot about the way that Jason Burton has been running this program, the fact that they aren't ever out of it, even down by 19. And so I don't know, I'm excited to, again, we talked about that game that's coming up, but I just think that this Mean Green team, even though they lost to South Florida, I think that they have a lot still going for them in the right direction. And I think even that loss against South Florida, you saw them just fighting until the very end.
They absolutely did. And you mentioned it a little bit there. They're going to fight until the very end. They're going to scratch and claw and win games like that against Temple because they fight along the way. But if you think that they're, by any stretch of the imagination, done with close games, not the case. They've got, of course, the UTSA game that we've already alluded to a couple times. They've got Tulane coming up this weekend. That's a nationally televised game. That's the first time North Texas has been nationally televised inside the Super Pit in decades. I mean, it's been a long time since they've done so. So that's an exciting precedent set. But then they've got a rematch against Memphis that took a buzzer beater to beat on the road against the Memphis Tigers. They've got a rematch on the road against Tulsa, a team that played pretty well at the Super Pit, but ultimately North Texas was able to outlast them at home. Then they go on the road against East Carolina, a team that went to the conference final last year at Dickies Arena. North Texas is facing a tough stretch right now, and they're doing so luckily with one of the better players in the conference, and that's Tamisha Lampkin.
She is just so good, and she has the ability to just impact everything offensively and defensively.
Yes.
We talk so much about her scoring, and you look at her numbers there, just her efficiency on offense as well, but just the way that she's a presence on defense as well. And I think when you think about North Texas, I mean, the men, obviously, the defense is a big thing, but the women also play that tough, tenacious defense. Lampkin affects that as well. And I think the thing for me that really stands out is her leadership and maturity. And I think that's something that Jason Burton really leans on a lot because she is just one of those people, when you watch her play, you see that she's affecting every other player around her. And I think as you're trying to step into a program and build it, the reason they're able to have success so quickly is because Tamisha Lampkin is there and committed to stay even after having multiple years. Just being able to impact North Texas, I think, has been a really big key for her.
She's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And I've been around this program. That's no secret from the time when I was in college. So this is Tamisha Lampkin has grown so much over these 4 years and over the time that she's been in Denton because when she first got there, she would get in foul trouble. She wasn't necessarily efficient with the ball in her hands. Now she can create, and that's what's different. That's what makes her the player of the year in the conference if Jordan Jenkins wasn't in the conference. That's the only difference right now is Jordan Jenkins still exists and she's down and doing what she's doing in San Antonio. Tamisha Lampkin would be in that conversation and was the co-player of the year in the preseason for a reason. She's lived up to that more so than maybe even the other expectations of the first-team all-conference players from earlier this campaign as well. One thing as a team that I like to look at least 10 games in, I mean, we're 10 games in now to conference play. One thing I like to look at is where you rank in terms of your points per game and opponents' points per game. I know it's very simple, and in this day and age of the analytics, it's always very fun to look at some of the deeper analytics. Do you put the ball in the net, and does your team that you're playing put the ball in the net? North Texas is probably the most balanced team in both of those categories across the board in the American right now. They're 4th in points per game. They're 5th in opponents' points per game allowed. So right there in the top 5 of both categories, they're the only team in the American that is in both the top 5 in opponents' points per game and points per game so far. The only other team that's close is Tulane, who we've already shouted out already with the Green Wave. They're 1st in scoring, and they're 6th in opponents' points per game. So no other team inside the top 5. I think maybe borderline UTSA's right there. I think they're 1st and 6th in a couple of those categories as well. So along the way, North Texas, UTSA, you mentioned it already. They're balanced. They get it done, and Tamisha Lincoln's a big part of that.
And when you talk about some of that balance, a lot of other players are stepping up around her. I know
Sure.
we talked about previously Kyla Deck and what she's been able to do.
Oh, she
Not
was
on this
so
show,
good
but
in that Temple game.
Yes, let's talk a little bit about that because
Yeah.
I think we kind of breezed over it. She just looked so good, and I know she missed a little bit for injury.
Concussion.
Ever since she's come back, you've had a chance to be up close and personal like with this team. So what do you think has kind of switched back on for her ever since she's been on the court?
Well, it adds an extra guard that Jason Burton can trust in any situation, whether she's scoring the rock or not. She's known as one of the better on-ball defenders. I would classify her as a top 5 on-ball defender in the American. She is very good defensively, and that's why they've had success on that side of the ball. So Kyla Deck comes in, and when she had a game like she did against Temple, it's just a little cherry on top because she's going to provide defense, but then she went 7 for 7 from the field with 16 points, hit a couple threes along the way. She can shoot the lights out if she wants to, but then you've got games like she had against South Florida where she goes 0 for 4 from the field in 17 minutes against the Bulls. Didn't necessarily provide anything on offense. She was still very good defensively. So that's what they give because Jacqueline Moore is a high-level scorer. She's a volume shooter, and she has streaks good and bad. You saw her early in conference play take off and take things to the next level from a points per game element. From the last couple of weeks, she's kind of died down a little bit, and she's gone back into some of those early struggles of actually shooting at a high clip. Desiree Wooten, a sophomore guard that you can kind of rely on both ends of the floor, but again, not consistent as a scorer. So you have the depth to say, hey, Jason Burton, you can rely on these players back and forth, but do you have the consistency across the board to really make runs and win another conference title like they were able to do last year? That's yet to be seen. Here's the thing. They're ramping up to March. In the conversations that I've had for Jason Burton, everything is a learning moment. Everything is a learning moment. And that's why he's a great coach. You see that across the board from some of the other coaches we mentioned. Fernandez at South Florida, Karen Aston at UTSA, Jason Burton's right there. Learn along the way because, yes, you might drop a game to South Florida in a tight one in the middle of conference play. But when it comes to Dickies Arena in Fort Worth, you don't want what happened last year to happen again, where you lose in the first round or second round, but your first game after the bye to the Rice House. You don't want that to happen again. That's what they're trying to avoid.
Yeah, learning from mistakes and how do you rebound from those mistakes is something that every coach will tell you.
And they're getting a chance to do that with these games coming up.
Exactly. And another team that seems to have learned from their mistakes, they went 0-3 starting off conference. They're now 5-2 after that 0-3 start is the UAB Blazers. So picking up where maybe they wanted to be at the beginning, but they didn't go 0-4, 0-4, 0-5. They were like, let's rebound and figure out a way to win some games, and they're doing it right now.
Yeah, definitely so. And this is I just want to reverse a little bit and go back a couple of episodes. Maria loves it when I do this.
I hate when he's anyway. Continue.
What was that?
I don't like when you're right.
Yeah, the experience is starting to show up from that UAB team. I was in Alabama this past week, and there's some excitement about where they're building and what they're doing, both men's and women's, by the way. I think the men are starting to find their click as well, and we can kind of hit that next week's episode. But let's talk about the experience on the UAB Blazers. Maddie Walsh, Sarah Bershers, Jade Weathersby, they've been around this program for years at a time. Of course, Randy Norton's been around for the last 12 seasons across the board. They know how to win big games. They know how to put it together. And they have a track record of weird wins and losses. Of course, their only real head-scratcher was the Wichita State one across the way. But they've had good wins. They've had good losses. When you click, you click. And I think that's where they're starting to head right now. They've put it together 5-2 over their last 7 games. They've got some tough games on the schedule coming up. And I mentioned how 3 of their top 4 scorers are experienced with Walsh, Bershers, and Weathersby. let's talk about Journey Armstead and what she's brought. That's the X factor of this whole thing. If Journey Armstead's able to play at the level she's been playing at, she could change the entire trajectory of this Blazers bunch.
Well, she's just doing things offensively that you don't see all the time. She is so athletic. She has the ability to score in so many different ways. She creates shots for herself as well, and I think that's one of the reasons that this UAB team is having success, because teams have to key in on her a little bit more now, and then it opens up some of those more veteran scorers like a Maddie Walsh, with Journey Armstead having to be more of a focus. And so I love watching her play. A little preview, she may be making another appearance later on in the show. Woo-hoo. Not that we're talking to her, but maybe in another segment that we do every week to show off some of that athleticism. And I think when you have a player like that who can take some of the pressure off some of those more veteran scorers that everybody else knows, it's going to really help your team.
Yeah, and we just talked about the depth from North Texas. I don't know if UAB has that all-around depth, but they have an all-around Armstead. I'll tell you, just from watching the film and what she's done, the facilitation, the all-around play that she brings to the table is tremendous. She's so clean with the basketball. She lives in that 10-plus points per game scoring element. Very active on the boards. You see there 4 rebounds per game, and she's only 5'8", but she still finds a way to carve out some space on the low block, get some possession, and end up working on the boards. But the thing that impresses me most is her vision, the court vision. You hear about that every once in a while from coaches and the way that they're able to see things before they develop. In a team like this and in a roster like this where you have Walsh and Bershers and Weathersby, if Armstead can see things before they develop and continue to tell the future and then telegraph a pass across the floor to somebody, that's what's going to be legit. And I hate saying this because we have so much left. I still think this is a team, and I said it the first time around, I still think this is a team that's going to be dangerous in March.
I'm not doubting you. I think one thing
you shouldn't doubt me.
I really wish I could, but I have to say you have been right. You've been right too many times. That
tell the fans how right I was going into the North Texas UTSA men's game.
You don't want North Texas fans to know that you thought that North Texas was going to lose.
I just saw it coming, guys.
Yeah, he said that UTSA was going to win on the men's side, so I wasn't going to rat you out.
I don't know if I said was going to win, but I said it was going to be a good game.
You did say it was going to be a good game.
And they were going to challenge.
Maybe we could pull up the message thread.
Maybe next week.
Yeah, next week. We'll bring
Continue,
it back up.
Though.
Anyway, I will say I'm starting to get on the UAB bandwagon here just because I think the key factor for me is you're adding in Journey Armstead, right? But I think the biggest thing is that leadership from some of those older players who have so much experience. And I think especially when you get into March, especially when you're in the postseason, that is one of those difference makers where they've been there before, right? They know how to respond to the good, to the bad. You're seeing it play out in this season already. They start 0-3 in conference. Yeah. And the fact that we're talking about them as being a contender just shows that they adjusted and that they're still in this race. And so I'm going to agree with Kyle right now. I'm getting on the UAB bandwagon, definitely starting to turn this season around, especially in conference play. Now,
Blazers fans, you heard it. You heard it.
We'll clip it. We'll see what happens in March. One team that's kind of doing a little bit of the reverse, though, is Temple. They started off pretty hot. Now they're struggling a little bit. They're having some issues closing out games. Yeah. I think they're fine. I'm not hitting any panic buttons. I think that they're a very good team. They have a lot of different scorers. I like what Diane Richardson's doing. There's a reason she finished at the top of the conference last year. Sure. I think they're going to be fine. But some of those games, like blowing that 19-point lead to North Texas, like we got to talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, and they're going to win some games coming up. They've got Memphis, South Florida, UAB, Tulane. Actually, I just read those off, and that doesn't sound funny. Those
they're going to win some games. Here's some good teams that we just talked about that are peaking right now.
That's going to be a tough one. And we'll talk about Memphis here in a minute. This is another conversation that I had in the last episode. But we talked about depth and how much it did concern me. They've got 4 players that you can really rally around, that you could really count on night in and night out. And you've seen how they've run out of gas. I mean, it's a thing because of depth. It's a thing because they've run out of gas late in games, because it doesn't just happen in the losses to Tulane and North Texas and UTSA. Take a look at the game against Tulsa. They won that game 73-51. But it was a nail-biter at the end when it probably shouldn't have been a nail-biter at the end. They had that game in hand in the third quarter, and Tulsa comes storming back and fell short just by a couple of points, 73-71. So, yes, it is a thing. And the best thing that I could come up with to explain it is the fact that we were concerned about it 2 weeks ago when they were winning games early in conference play, and they were winning against Florida Atlantic and UAB, East Carolina, Charlotte, and Florida Atlantic, and they were putting all those games together. Now we're starting to see the reverse end of it. And it's unfortunate right now for Temple because this is a gauntlet of a stretch. The 3 games that they've lost were Tulane. Of course, they're 4th in the conference. North Texas, 2nd in the conference. And UTSA, who's leading the conference right now. Those are the 3 games they've lost in the past.
Yeah, and so I think just at that point is why I kind of started this off with we're not panicking just yet because those teams are all teams that are playing really well, playing some of their best basketball. And you can't really get upset about it, but you also need to address what's happening with some of those. I mean, I'm sure Diane Richardson's upset about it, but let me rephrase how I said that. But I think that it's not like they're losing to some of the lower half teams in the conference. One person, though, that has been playing really well is Terriana Gary. She's been really good scoring the basketball for the Owls, and I think they need to rely on her and have a couple other people step up behind her if they want to continue to have that success that they had at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think you're starting to see that with Terriana Gary. You see what she's brought. 4th in the conference in scoring since the start of conference play. She's 5th in field goal percentage since the start of conference play, 4th in three-point percentage. Oh, and by the way, she's hit more three-point shots than any other player through 10 games of conference play as well. She's taken over since then, hit 33s in 10 games. So for the math wizards out there, guess what? That's 3 threes a game, at least 9 points on average from beyond the arc only. So if she's hitting, it's a completely different Temple Owls team. The only question that I have is, can she continue to hit at a high level when teams start double teaming? We've seen her have to go through a couple of double teams. These last 3 games, they've done a great job of at least limiting her shot efficiency. She still gets her points, and they're going to find a way to get her in successful spots, but she has to fight through a lot of challenges in order to get there, whereas she might have flown under the radar at the beginning of conference play.
Yeah, and I think that being said, other people are going to need to step up, and Temple has scorers that have the ability to do that. Tiara East is one of them. She's been great for them the entire year. So if Terriana Gary can just figure out how to distribute once that double team comes, I think they're going to be fine. It's just finding those extra couple players to not even give you, double figures, but just get a couple buckets and get some more points on the board. Now, another team that is struggling a little bit with consistency is the Rice Owls. Beat some good teams, lose to some bad teams. They just can't seem to find a rhythm. Again, I'm not totally panicking. They're still 5-5 in conference play, and they're the defending tournament champion. Yeah. I think they have a lot of really good pieces, but it's just figuring out what the little blips in the road have been.
I'm a little bit panicked.
You're a little
when
panicked?
It comes to Rice.
Let me hear your reasoning.
And part of it is tough because they did what they did last year, where they were in the bottom half of the conference, and they ended up making the run and then winning the tournament and taking it all the way from the 10 seed to the NCAA tournament. So I don't want to ever count Rice out. Plus, I'm really a fan of what Lindsay Evans does. When we were talking earlier in the year, she talked about how smart her team is and the type of players that they recruit to Rice, because it's Rice. It's Stanford of the South. It's one of the highest IQ institutions in the entire country for a good reason, and they've built that as their brand. So she gets a certain level of player. Last year, she talked about how when things clicked from the 10 seed to the NCAA tournament, the thing that clicked the most was those players who are always inquisitive because of who they are and how they're wired as a student. And they're students of the game just as much as they're student athletes. So she said that they were inquisitive, and they would ask, why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? And when it finally clicked and they said, instead of asking why, let's ask how. How can we do this better? How can we take this game to the next level? And that's what clicked down the stretch. They need to do that again. And I don't want to say it was a flash in the pan. in 2024, and what they were able to do in March was really impressive and really incredible. But in talking to Coach Edmonds, she doesn't want to be the 10 seed. She wants to be the 4 or the 5 or the 6 seed.
They were picked to be the 10 seed.
Exactly. They were picked to finish. They were picked to finish second in the preseason poll. They're 7th right now. So they're tied for second with North Texas in those the thought process. So all of that kind of plays a factor. All of it does. And right now you're seeing a team that just came off a loss to Florida Atlantic. I think before that, I would say, okay, their losses weren't anything crazy to write home about. It was UAB, North Texas, UTSA, and as we talked about earlier, those teams are at the top of the conference for a reason. They're the juggernauts right now. Rice was supposed to be there, but at least they were winning the games they should have. At least they were winning the games they should have. Then they lost 66-61 to Florida Atlantic. Did not play well in that game. They're still 7th in scoring. They're still 4th in scoring allowed. I'm sorry for going on a bit of a rant, but that's just how I feel about this Rice team right now. They're talented. They've got a lot of the same players and a lot of the same contributions that they had in that tournament run that they had last year. How do you get it to click? It feels like they need that moment to surface again.
And I totally understand your point. And I think because of the thing that you just said at the very end, having some of those players who have been there in March, having those players that had a big impact, I think that's an advantage. But I agree with you. 1, they need to figure out how to make it click. 2, though, that's the reason why I'm not counting them out just yet, because I think that experience and that ability can help, especially as you get.
But can lightning strike twice? That's where I'm a little concerned.
See, I don't know if I look at it as lightning striking twice. I look at it as when you get to postseason basketball, different players. Some things click. Yeah. And I just
got UConn making a run as a 9 seed and winning a national championship.
Yeah,
you got North Carolina squeaking in and making it to the Final Four. It happens. It totally does.
Because I think on the reverse, there's teams that are really great in the regular season and choke in the postseason. So I'm not saying that Rice is going to be in the tournament and do what they did last year. I'm saying they know how to do it. And I think knowing how to play in those big games is something that a lot of people take for granted. We kind of scratch our heads at different teams that go to the postseason and they're the 1 seed and they lose in the first or second round. Yeah. And
I know a team or two that does that.
Yeah. But that's a whole different topic. So my point is, I think that experience can help.
Sure. They just haven't won the big games this year.
Yes.
That's where I'm at. They have not won those big games. They've lost to South Florida, North Texas, and UTSA. Right. And they'll have a chance again down the line. They play Tulane again this week. They play South Florida on the road after a bye going into next week. And then they get UTSA and North Texas at home again. So, sure, Rice has time to turn this thing around. But I don't have confidence, at least seeing them in person.
Right.
They're all out of sorts, especially if you don't have Dom Ennis. Yeah. Dom Ennis is a great player.
She's been great.
And I think when she missed some time in January, that was a big loss because you expected that to elevate the rest of your team. You say, right, okay, our best player's out. Let's put some players in some new positions. Let's start and kind of make them click. Her being back in the fold has been great. She's played well since doing so. They looked great against Charlotte and Tulsa, but you're supposed to look great against those two teams at this point in time. They didn't look great against FAU, and Dom Ennis was out there. So it all plays a factor, and you need your top players to step up in a big way. I don't know if I can count on Malia Fisher. I don't know if I can count on Dom Ennis to carry this Rice team because that's what it looks like they're going to need to do.
Yep. Well, we're 10 games in. We'll see where we are in March. One team, though, that has been playing competitive with a lot of the top teams in the conference, but just not figuring out how to finish some of those games has been Memphis. Talking about flashes in the pan, I feel like that's not necessarily the best analogy, but they've had flashes of really good basketball. Sure. And then they kind of let it go. And so we haven't talked about them too much on this show yet because of that, because they've been losing those big games. But I think we got to talk a little bit about their ability to stay in those games with the top teams and the good things that they've shown. And then we'll break down some of the reasons why they're not pulling those games out.
Isn't it weird that they have a few really impressive wins and then also a few really impressive losses? I just don't that doesn't really sound right across the board. I mean, the way that they took North Texas down to the wire was significant. They played close against a couple of teams along the way.
Too. Yeah, they should have won that game.
They very UTSA. Well, yeah, they very much so should have won that game against UTSA. Their win against ECU may have been the most impressive they've had all year. Back and forth for the entire first half, and then they kind of right the ship, no pun intended, with them playing the Pirates. And then they took over in the second half and didn't look back from that point forward. I like what I've seen from Memphis as an underdog. But like you said, they haven't had the talent or really the discipline. That UTSA game, I keep going back to that. They should have had that game. A late technical foul on really just working back down the floor was what put them behind the 8 ball in that game. They're showing that promise, but you got to have discipline, you got to have talent. And right now, they're just on the outside looking in each of those categories for me.
Yeah, but one person disciplined and talented is Tilly Bowler. She's been that is the anomaly. That is a big reason why they're in those games. She's averaging 17.2 points per game, and she is so athletic, just really dominant as well. I just really like the way that she plays basketball. 11 blocks on the year. She just scores. She shoots at a high clip. She's efficient. And so I think when we're calling for talent, we're calling for discipline. We got to around that. Memphis needs more Tilly Bowlers on their team.
Absolutely. She's all-around player. She's great. And like you said, it's not just about the pace that they play. Memphis plays up and down the floor. They get up, and they're second in the conference in scoring because of it. They average more possessions than any other team in the conference right now. So, yes, all of those things add up. But Bowler's out there shooting 41% and hitting threes at 38% at the moment, and that's why she's averaging those 17-plus points per game. She's the first team all-conference honoree that no one's talking about right now. Right. I would put her up there with the North Texas and Tamisha Lampkin. I'd put her up there with Jordan Jenkins. I'd put her up there with South Florida, a couple of the players that they have, and then Tulane and some of the players they have. Memphis is right now on the bottom half of the conference, and they've got a possible first-team all-conference honoree at the end of this thing because of how well she's been playing. What can you do around her? They have double-digit scores.
Right.
Don't get me wrong. They've got actually 1, 2, 3. They've got 4 more outside of Bowler, 5 in general that average double figures at the moment. But a lot of that is with 33% shooting. A lot of that's with 34% shooting. It's not efficient from beyond the arc. Got 24% here, 37% there. That's actually not too bad. There's a couple of things that are added elements into it. Piece it all together and then play some defense.
Yeah,
that's the other thing.
That's the key is they're not stopping teams.
They're dead last.
Yeah,
77 points per game, and it's really not even close on what they're allowing. Play some defense. I know you get up and down the floor. I know it's tiring, and I know the depth is stretched thin. Memphis has promise.
Yeah,
and we've seen double-digit seeds make runs in this tournament before.
I'm not counting anyone out at this point. I feel like, especially after you saw the way that last year's season ended and the multiple ties based on how things were going to play out, and I think Memphis, like you said, the pieces are there. They just have to defend a little bit better and figure out how to share that basketball a little bit more. Use those scores if everybody can get hot at the same time.
Or just keep feeding Bowler, too. I'm cool
I
with
mean,
that.
she shoots at 41%, so I think that's not a bad idea. But Memphis does play a couple games this week, and we have a couple other big games coming up on the schedule. Memphis is actually our American Hoops showcase game with Temple, so that's on Wednesday.
Is that in Philly or is that in Memphis?
It is in Philly. So at the time everybody's watching this, the American Hoops Showcase will have already happened. So we hope that everybody tuned in. We're excited about it. It's National Girls and Women in Sports Day on Wednesday, so that's going to be exciting as well.
Cool.
But yeah, that's the game to definitely take a look at, or we hope that you looked at. Kyle, what other ones are you circling?
Well, we mentioned earlier Tulane and some of the prowess that they've had. They've got a huge opportunity. If they sweep North Texas, they're in the driver's seat.
Yeah.
Both them and UTSA, of course. But Tulane could be in the driver's seat if they go to the Super Pit and knock off North Texas on national television coming up on Sunday. Really excited about that matchup overall. Keep in mind, this Tulsa team's not out of it, too. They've got a couple of chances for some wins on the road. Tulsa and East Carolina, Tulsa taking on Charlotte and East Carolina. Couple of North Carolina matchups there. They could go back to 2-0 there and keep rocking in the right direction. And then the final page, I want to talk about what UAB can do in that Temple matchup.
I know. I'm excited for that one. I think we talked about just the way that they've been playing really well lately. Temple trying to figure things out. on their side of things as well. So I think that one could be a good one too.
Should be a whole lot of fun. North Texas in that rematch against Tulsa. They've had some struggles with Tulsa in the past, a team that they tied in the regular season with last year along the way as well. Games across the board, of course, you can catch most of them on the ESPN channel of networks and ESPN Plus as well. All right, before we get into our top plays, Maria, we have an opportunity to catch up with one of the spotlight student athletes that we've talked about already. How about Carla Brito from South Florida?
7 to shoot. Bulls got to put it in motion, get a decent shot here. Brito from 3. Carla Brito with just the second 3 of the night for South Florida.
Carla Brito has been making buckets for the last couple weeks for the Bulls, and she's going to join us now. Carla, thank you so much for coming on All-American.
Thank you for having me here.
We're very excited to have a chance to chat with you. Your team has won their last 4 games against 2 top teams also in the American, beating UTSA and also beating North Texas. We'll talk individually about both of those games, but I want to go back to that loss against UAB because you lose to the Blazers and then you win your next 4. What was the message after that game that kind of shifted the momentum into your favor?
I think we knew that we could win that game and it was really important. But like after that game, we changed our mind. We were like, guys, we need to win. Like all the games that we play right now is very important for us, like for the conference at the end. So like that loss, it hurt us. But like right now, we're doing really, really good. Like the last 2 games, it was really, really important to win. So we did what coach asked us. So like we are really, really happy what we're doing.
Yes, you certainly should be happy with what you're doing. Let's talk first about that win against UTSA. They were undefeated in conference play before the Bulls beat them. So as you were preparing for that game, what was the message? And at what point in that game did you know, oh, we're going to win this one?
I mean, we took it very personal. I think the game with how you say like they were undefeated. So like we always talk with coach about like protect your home floor. We play like together. The chemistry right now is really good in the team, not just on the court, outside of the court. So like in that game, it was a tough game, but like everyone came to like show up that day. So like it was a really, really good win.
You talk about the chemistry of South Florida. If you could describe it in the way that your team is getting along and playing well together, how would you do that?
I'm gonna say like this team is so much different compared with the other teams that have been. For example, like I can be talking about whatever with any of them. Like it's crazy. Like we get along a lot, so like it's really good, and I think that's one it makes us like really, really good on the court. Trying to like get to know each other better every day, or like just like show up to practice. Everyone like supporting each other. So like that's what I think that's the big key that we have right now.
Yeah, that support becomes so crucial, especially as you get into those grueling days later in the season. So you beat UTSA, you continue that hot streak, and you beat North Texas. After you won that game, what has the vibe been like around the team? Do you kind of feel like, all right, we're starting to click, this is starting to work, or what's the messaging?
Honestly, with these 2 wins, we have like changed a lot our mentality. We are like believing like we can do it, like whatever we want if we show up every day and we like keep working hard. But like I think we haven't done anything yet. Like we're gonna keep working hard. Our goal is win the regular season, but also like the tournament. So like we're gonna keep working hard every day.
Yeah, it's important to keep the eye on the prize with that postseason right around the corner. Now, you have a couple of days off until you play again. You take on Temple. What are some keys for your team to keep this streak alive?
I think keep together, like the energy that we show up every day on practice and the games too. How you say, like now it's gonna be tough moments that are coming up postseason right now. So like we're gonna keep working hard, listen to each other, being a good teammate, listen to Jose what he says, and like I think like we're gonna be fine if we just like show up, all of us, and keep working hard.
You have been a model of consistency the last couple of games. You're scoring in double figures almost every game. You're getting your rebounds. What is it about the way that you're playing right now that you think is just working well for you?
I think right now I don't put a lot of pressure on myself. Sometimes when I feel that I need to put more, I don't know, points or that stuff, I don't think that works for me. So right now I'm just going do my role that I have on the team, rebound, run every time, defense, and then I know the offense is gonna come at some point. So but I think I feel really, really good because everyone is bringing their own roles. Everyone knows what they have to do on the court. So right now I think I'm doing good because of my teammates.
Your role is definitely noticed, and you're playing a big role for this South Florida team. Carla, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today on All-American.
Thank you. Appreciate it, guys.
Had the chance to catch up with Carla Brito prior to their game against North Texas. Just a delight to talk to. And, of course, we talked about the international flair. She brings that knowledge and that insight and that fundamental aspect of the game to the South Florida program, and you can see why they have a lot of success with her.
Yeah, I love how she talked about just playing her role and doing a good job within the things that she's good at, and that's the reason why the whole team is being successful. Yeah. So definitely a fun interview. But now it's time for our favorite fun part of the show.
Yes.
Top plays.
We got 5 of them.
Or do we?
Oh, wait.
We might have more, but this one, Elise Hill from way behind the three-point arc. That is Caitlin Clark range. Almost at the logo.
Now, it's a big logo there in Tulsa.
It is a big logo.
It's got a hurricane on it, of course, because of the Golden Hurricane.
Yeah.
However, I would classify that as extra NBA range.
Extra NBA.
Yeah, WNBA range.
Oh, okay. I like that.
Get it?
I picked up what you were putting down there.
Thank you. Very nicely done from Elise Hill from the Tulsa Golden Hurricane. Moving on to number 4. We talked about her earlier, and Maria, you may have given it up. Journey Armstead with a reverse lay-in at the Devlin Fieldhouse against Tulane. That UAB team clicking, and Armstead's a big reason for it. Look at how smooth that lay-in was, and the ability off of the break out of the trap, just sneaks around a defender on the low block.
Just so much athleticism there. Now, for our third play, I'm not repeating myself, I promise. Stop me if you've seen this one before. There's a guy named Jordan Riley, and he likes to dunk a lot. So much so that I don't even know how many times he's been on top plays, but we can't not have him on because he does things like that.
He is so athletic. I've talked about some of the more athletic players in the conference. I don't know if there's any that are up to the task of Jordan Riley, what he brings, of course, averaging double figures for that ECU bunch in conference play. This is a big reason why. Oh, my goodness, poster on the road in your own gym. You got posterized like that. That one's tough.
You know what's wild? Tough. He had another dunk in this game that was similar to that. I was trying to figure out, all right, which one do I want to put in top plays? Because he's just that incredible.
You might as well just have a Jordan Riley's top plays.
We should just do a whole feature.
We can make it happen. How about this one? You talk about a dunk. We've got a steal leading to a dunk. The trailer, watch out. Kobe Knox, here he comes on the back end of it, and he slams it over the top of another defender. Whew. He didn't really challenge as much as the Temple defender did.
It wasn't as much.
Rice is smart. Of course, we talked about that already in the show.
Very
Rice
intelligent student athletes. They're like, nah, go ahead. You do what you got to do.
This.
We already turned the ball over there. But Rice does take – oh, no, you dropped something. Rice does take our top spot in top plays. I watched this live. Trey Broadnax behind the back. Hayden Powell. Woo! It looked like Broadnax was taking it to the hole and then just, nope, I'm going to just behind the back.
Could have drawn a foul there, too.
I know. That was a beauty.
Wow. Oh, man. Whew. Too clean. I talked about smart. How about vision? Get
vision,
that quarterback vision.
Distribution. Boom.
Right back behind the back.
Love it.
Incredible. Speaking of vision, we had the vision and the ability to watch Seth Hennigan in the Senior Bowl. Reese's Senior Bowl action. A game winner as our bonus top play. He finds Jake Besh of TCU in the end zone to win it. The Memphis quarterback who threw over 100 touchdown passes during his career with the Memphis Tigers goes to Mobile, Alabama. I was on site for practice this week, was talking with Seth about his experience. He said it was an incredible experience, an ability to go and see what he could do against some of the top competition, the all-stars at each of their respective positions going into the NFL draft. He was a late add to the roster, and he was a late touchdown thrower as well. That was a game-winning walk-off to Jake Besh. Congratulations to Seth Hennigan on an incredible collegiate career. That was the last touchdown he's ever going to throw in a Memphis Tigers helmet.
That's sad.
Isn't that kind of sad?
That is
But it was an
sad.
incredible one to win it for the, I believe it was a national team that won it in that one.
Yeah, I think it's exciting because it's exciting, it's bittersweet and sad because
Sure.
we've gotten to see him throw a lot of touchdown passes in that helmet.
Yeah.
And that's the last one.
And, hey, Tulane had a player, a defensive back, that had a pick in the end zone early in that game as
Americans
well.
representing.
Just represent. We've
We
been
love
trying
it.
to tell you guys. They won the Commissioner's Cup or whatever, the Bowl Challenge Cup.
Bowl Challenge
The Bowl Challenge Cup, they won it. The trophy we didn't know was a thing until it showed up, and they won all those games.
Yeah, we need a picture with that trophy.
We'll make sure it happens. All right, that does it for us here on All American. We had so much fun today talking some women's hoops. We'll be back next week. We're going to talk men's hoops. If I don't
hold on to
wreck
that.
our studio in the process,
That'd be nice. Don't
be
do
sure
that.
to tune in to all the American Athletic Conference showcase games that are coming up, Maria. There's some extra ones on the schedule, trying to showcase all of our student athletes across the American Conference. So much exciting stuff coming your way. But we'll be back next week with more All-American for Chris and Zach in the back. For Maria Trivelpiece, I'm Kyle Youmans. We'll see you next time.